So our next speaker is Lavinia Osbourne. She's got fans in the room. Good. Okay, good. Great, thank you for your exuberance, that's great. Okay, so Lavinia is not one of my students, right? So I don't actually know her talk, and so I'm looking forward to hearing it. The title of the talk is Breaking the Generational Cycle of Poverty. I'm going to say that again. Breaking the Generational Cycle of Poverty. So, who is Lavinia? Lavinia Osbourne, the founder and director of Butterfly Wealth Creation, a holistic financial well-being and money mindfulness consultancy, where she advocates the importance of financial well-being and money mindfulness so that her clients can have a better relationship with their money. Sounds pretty good. Improve their personal finance and spread their financial wings to create wealth, preserve it, and prosper. So are we liking the sound of this?
Yes.
Bring it on. So you want to do all that, preserve it, prosper, create wealth, whilst maintaining a personal sense of peace and happiness as they do it. So that's great. That's made it. She also works with corporates and has so far worked with WeWork, MFW Consultancy, and other high-profile brands. In addition to the above, she runs and hosts Women in Blockchain Talks, a platform to elevate women in the blockchain sphere with the purpose of not only encouraging other women to come into the industry and create a career, but show them how other women have done it and are doing it. So, that's Lavinia. Please give her a warm welcome.
Women and money don't mix. I'm going to share with you a journey of money, history, and culture of my family. Who here is an investor or saver? Raise your hands. We all are, in one way or another. The question is, what do we choose to invest in? Be it with our time, with our energy, and of course, our money. My grandmother was a staunch saver. She could make a lot from a little. My mother, on the other hand, was not. My grandmother used to save into a pardoner. A pardoner is something that people from the Caribbean and the Windrush generation would invest in. It's a sort of saving scheme. And it was a great way for these individuals from the Windrush era, the Windrush generation, to partake in, not only to save, but also to engage in their communities, especially as they were newcomers to this land called England. The pardoner was a way for them to purchase their first property here in England. And as we know, property is a way of creating and generating wealth. At that time, women didn't really invest in properties. It was the men, the husbands. So the power of creating and generating wealth was in the hands of the men. This was evident to see after my grandmother's husband died. Because as I touched upon, my grandmother was a great saver, but she knew nothing about investing for the long term. So how was she going to pass on those skills to her children, her daughters, much less her grandchildren? My mum, on the other hand, had a lot more opportunities than my grandmother, of course. It was the 1970s and she started her career on the factory floors across the Midlands. She then moved to London and she worked her way up to be a manager for one of the famous London department stores, Liberty's. Even so, like my grandmother, she did not know how to invest, how to create wealth, much less leave a legacy for her children. The thing about my mom was that even though she was a teenage single mother of twins, she was ambitious. Growing up, I associated poverty with people who looked like me, as well as women and single parents. I knew I couldn't change the way that I looked or my gender, but I could choose not to be a single parent, teenage, unwed mother. Because that represented to me the hardships of hand-me-downs, hunger, and absent fathers, absent men. In my young mind, I associated men with money. Education was my way out. I believed education, get a good education, you can get a good job. If you get a good job, then you can make good money and then you won't be poor anymore. But the realities of life are not so black and white. Because you can have a good education, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will get a good job. And just because you have a good job doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be poor. What I have learnt over the years is that wealth and poverty is a mindset. It's not just simply about how much you earn. It's about what you do with it. But the question is, if no one has taken the time to show you, advise you, teach you how to manage your funds, how to make what you have work for you, then how do you know what to do? At the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know. In 2008, during the financial crash, and during the 10 years previous, I had accumulated a number of assets and a number of investments, and I lost them. I had a good education. I got a good job, working in a bank of all places. I invested. But due to no fault of my own, everything I had worked towards was pulled like a rug from under my feet. All that hard work was lost. Because of my lack of financial education and financial knowledge, as well as the fact that I had no one around me to ask for any advice. I was the first one to go to university in my family, the first one to work in the city, the first one to buy property. There was no one around for me to say, help me, advise me. And so I made so many mistakes, and it put me back. I had to restart from scratch. Who here has ever been in a situation where you have to restart? So you know how challenging it is to do that. But I could do it once, so I knew I could, and I would do it again. But this time, I was going to do it differently. I wasn't just going to go down, get a good education, get a good job. I was going to take the route of entrepreneurship and self-employment. And that route introduced me to financial education. What is money? How does money work? The rule of 72, the power and the magic of compound interest. Things we should have learnt at school. This then took me to create my own holistic financial well-being and money mindfulness consultancy, where I help clients to have a better relationship with their money, to improve their finances, and not only create wealth, but also to preserve it and prosper. And not just prosper, but prosper with the mindset of abundance and wealth rather than poverty. So, how do you break the cycle of generational poverty, of bad money habits and bad money decisions, and the shame that comes with the consequences of those bad decisions, those habits? It could be debt, it could be poverty, it could be financial abuse in one way or another. It could also be, it can manifest itself in a way that you devalue your abilities, your talents. Who would pay me for that? Am I really worth that? Can I charge that? Well, how you break it is, one, you recognize and acknowledge the situation. Two, you get an education, and not the education at school, but financial education, as I touched upon. And three, you take action on that education. You implement what you learn. As you can tell, I am a strong advocate of financial education, financial empowerment, and financial well-being. And one of my goals in life is to create a financial well-being, wellness day, where this sort of information is given, is accessible to everyday people like you and me. Why? Because money is still one of society's last and greatest taboo. And because it is, there are so many people who are suffering with money shame, generation after generation after generation. And not only money shame, but daily money anxieties. My mother and my grandmother weren't able to break my family's cycle of generational poverty. But I can. And so can you for your families. It all starts with a conversation, a money conversation. So all of you who put your hand up, I invite you to have a conversation with me. And for those who didn't, reach out, because you never know, that conversation may change your life. My details are at the back of the forms. And so change your life and also the future generations that come after you. Thank you.